This is an exciting time for us to introduce chronic disease management to the substance use disorders journey. We have an opportunity here to re-engineer or reassociate some very excellent parts that are available in the time period after discharge from a rehab center up to the 5-year marker, where we know if they obtain abstinence and sobriety for 5 years, then they drop to a likelihood of 15% of relapse. And that's the end of the program. So it begins when discharge is taking place from the treatment center, and it ends at the 5-year marker. And what we're doing is we're taking all of these really excellent tools that are available in disease management and empirically proven studies, these great services of peer-to-peer coaching and 12-step programs and smart education, and we're managing them. Currently, they're not being managed. There's no entity that does that. There's no structure. There's no process. But a disease management product does give us that, and it incorporates all of it. Let's go through some of the parts in this presentation to more clearly identify and delineate what exactly are we talking about are the pieces of a general disease management concept. When considering a disease management model, there are 3 key groups that need to be in the room. One is the providers. When we look at the providers, we're actually looking at the timeline after and outside of a treatment center. Who are they? What services do they provide? How do they bring value to this person's goal of abstinence and sobriety? We need to help them organize themselves in a way that is productive to the patient. And that's what a disease management model does. It manages the disease. Now, with the providers, they need to have a buy-in to the science that's being applied, to their services, and how they're getting paid. The payer needs to be assured that there's fidelity to the process, that they're getting value in what they're paying for, that good science is being used, the patient needs are being effectively addressed. And a lot of this has to do with time and process. Are they following the process? Are they doing it in a timely manner? And then the patient. The patient needs to learn. They need to become their own case management company, care coordinating group, disease management coordinator. They need to have a role in this. And those that are in that patient's life, likewise, need to be educated and have an understanding of what role they can play and how to do it. At some point, it needs to be determined, where does the chronic disease management model fit into the sequence of what's taking place. We have the drug, we have the drug's impact on the body. Now we have a medical condition. We use a diagnostic to determine the medical condition, and then we design a plan of treatment to respond what the findings were in the diagnostic due to the medical treatment from what the impact was of the drug. Then we determine in a reassessment, is the plan of treatment working as we had anticipated, and we therefore put them on a clinical pathway. This is where the next step is disease management. And now what we're going to do is we're going to manage the clinical pathway as it relates to the plan of treatment and the reassessment. And then we'll keep doing reassessments, and we will be adjusting in the disease management how that model will affect the adherence, compliance, follow-up, follow-through of everybody that's involved in the plan of treatment. When we look at the drug and we look at the condition that the drug creates, they're all one and the same. And what we want to do is we want to make sure we're not missing something that's impacting their ability to maintain sobriety and abstinence. So it may be a medical condition that's doing that. And unless we address it, we'll always be chasing after the addiction and not really addressing some of the other root causes. So that diagnostic that takes us into the a review of a kind of a known medical condition, we pretty much know that if you're abusing cocaine or heroin, you're more than likely developing some type of impact in cardiac, certainly neurology and pulmonary. So with that in mind, we find that methamphetamines tend to impact dental. I mean, these are obvious ones, but we don't want to necessarily just stick with what's obvious. The fact is, the diagnostic will tell us. The fact is, what type of drug they're using. We've been down this road enough that we've seen enough that we can say, listen, if it's cocaine, also consider looking at the medical conditions of these three systems in the body. Look for all the things, but specific care towards looking at these, and that will allow us to understand the drug as it relates to medical conditions. Okay, we have a list of the different types of drugs that we know are commonly involved in substance use disorders. And we have a list of studies that have been performed for each of those drugs in terms of a medical condition that is the cause of them using this drug. So, what we can do now is we can start to attach, let's say, heroin or cocaine or methamphetamine and say, okay, what different types of medical conditions for each of those is likely to take place, and in what category of medical condition. So when we look at the body and we say that there are different systems that run our body, neurology, pulmonary, the lung, cardiac, our immune system, our musculoskeletal. Let's take a look at the kind of like the diagram of the body and its different systems and say, what is heroin doing to pulmonary? Well, we know that information, um, and the type of diagnostics that are done. So that's where we want to be. We want to get smart about this in the way that we actually process the services and create metrics that measure our success. We got to bring this all together in one place. And in a disease management model, we can do that. The platform for IT empowers that management process. So when we're taking a look at the medical condition to a diagnostic, ground glass opacity is one condition that might exist in a diagnosis. It's suspected, let's say. So radiology would be the diagnostic. They have algorithms for diagnosing ground glass in radiology, their specialty group. And we want to put this person in front of this group and say, could you take a look at them and see if we might be dealing with this? Because if we are, we could write a plan of treatment that's going to carry them into a much better health posture. So when we're looking at the diagnostic, and that can come from radiology, it can come from the phlebotomist and the reports on blood, it can come from physical therapy, and then all your different specialty groups, all depending upon the assessment and what it is initially that, when you're doing the health status, what is this person presenting? But in a radiology diagnostic, algorithms are available in their discipline for this specific condition, and that's true for a lot of these specialties. And that's the purpose of this slide, is to suggest nobody needs to recreate the wheel here. These plan of treatments have been studied; they've been proven out. They are attached to a possibility when associating with the different types of drugs. So what we're going to do in the disease management model is just heighten the awareness. Hey, listen, we got a methamphetamine user, and here are some of the medical conditions that might present, and let's make sure we do a diagnostic on the ones that we see most frequently, or the ones that have the most reaching effect, or the ones that might be more hidden and then come up later. I mean, there's lots of reasons why we're doing the diagnostic, and then create a plan of treatment around what it is that we find. So technically, we could have several plan of treatments in, like, one in addiction, one in mental health, and one in medicine. But in all, it combines to one case management. That's the beauty of case management because it brings all of that together under one managing concept. This slide is not presented for what it contains. It's more presented for the visual effect of, there are algorithms based on initial presentation. In this case, it's a radiology evaluation. And then it discusses, if yes, then go to and conduct further tests. And then if these findings go to, and then in next steps. So we just wanted to point out that science has already done all this work, and we just need to make good use of it. And that's what we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to bring to bear the best of what we have in an affordable, reasonable, timely manner along the whole continuum of care. So now in disease management and in chronic care management, we're looking at the idea that the plan of treatment is really the driving force. And we need to constantly come back to the plan of treatment and reassess it. Once we have a plan of treatment, we can load it into a chronic care pathway. And so now they're more or less on a pathway that monitors and manages inside of a disease management process protocol. So with that in mind, we may be paralleling a 2 or 3 plan of treatments, but it's all okay because it goes down into their clinical pathways, which all combine into one disease management concept. And that person is more holistically managed because what we said earlier is true. These different conditions play heavy on each other. If you've got a mental illness and a dual diagnosis, we all know at this point, because we've seen it so many times, that does have adverse impact on coping skills and the ability to sustain lifelong recovery and abstinence and sobriety. So with that in mind, we would need to address that dual diagnosis. Well, the same is true for medical, too. Given that this is a disease and that on a timeline, it has the ability to plateau, it has the ability to decline, and it has the ability to get better. So reassessments are important that we have an idea as to which direction, if any, it's taking. And we want to make sure that that data is then pushed and compared into the baseline of where we were, but equally important, the clinical pathway. The reassessment tells us whether the plan of treatment is appropriate in keeping the person on the clinical pathway. Clinical pathways are designed out of science, and it allows us to take empirically proven studies and apply them to a kind of path of if then go to. Now, with that in mind, we want to make sure that our plan of treatment keeps us on the clinical pathway. Assessments and reassessments allow us to measure metrics that will tell us that the plan of treatment is working well, and the plan of treatment's adherence to the clinical pathway and its fit into that will tell us whether we're doing the right thing for the right goals. But with that in mind, we want to make sure that we are building the patient's understanding of the disease, their role, and how they can help to manage themselves. We don't want a person to just become dependent on us doing this for them, because then eventually, at the end of 5 years, this program will end. And we want them to become us in their world for their health care so that they can then perform these same duties after the program's over. Empowerment is the goal.